Hello boys and girls, this is Ms. Moreno. Today we're looking at Eureka Math, Module 1, Lesson 29, Topic B. The title of today's lesson is Solving Percent Problems, and our learning target, if you notice it's been the same for the last 4 days. I will find the percent of a quantity, and given a part and the percent, I will solve problems involving finding the whole. So let's look at the exploratory challenge. There's a claim. The claim is to find 10% of a number. All you need to do is move the decimal to the left once. Use at least one model to solve each problem. Example, tape diagram, table, double number line, or 10 by 10 grid. So go ahead and make your prediction if you think the claim is true or false and explain why. When you are done, you may unpause and continue. So let's look at part B right here. It says determine 10% of 300. So if we follow that claim about the decimal, moving the decimal one place to the left, that would give us 30. So if the claim were true, then 10% of 300 would be 30. And let's look at letter C, 10% of 80. So the claim says if you move the decimal once to the left, that would give you 10%, and that would be 8. So what I'm going to do is actually prove that this is correct. So let's start by looking at letter B, determine 10% of 300. So I'm going to show you two different ways. The first way will be using the double number line. And we always start by labeling. I like to put the percent on top, but it doesn't matter if it's on top or bottom, as long as you label your double number line. Remember, we always start at 0. And I am going to increase by 10%, right? Because we're figuring out 10% all the way to 100%. So I will partition in 10 equal parts all the way till we get to 100%. Now I know that 100% equals 300. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 equal parts. So 300 divided by 10 is 30. So that means my number line on the bottom will increase by 30. And here I can clearly see that 10% does equal 30. Another way to do this, I apologize, I went too fast, is by multiplying 300 by 1/10. That's the way we read it, 10% of 300. 300 by 1/10 gives you 300 over 10, which reduces to 30. So there's two different ways to get the answer 30. Again, you do what works best for you. I always try to show you different ways so that you find the way that makes sense to you. Okay, so we already determined that 10% of 300 is 30. Now we need to see and prove that 10% of 80 is 8. So I'm going to start with my double number line, always labeling the number lines and starting at 0. And because it is out of 10%, I'm going to increase by 10% all the way to 100%. I know that 100% equals 80. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 equals spots. So I'm going to do 80 divided by 10, which gives me 8. So I'm going to increase by 8, right, all the way to 80. And here I can clearly see that 10% is 8. I'm also going to show you doing the double number line. So what do we know? It's always out of 100. It clearly tells us that the percent is 10 and the whole is 80. The unknown is the part. So we multiply. I'm just going to rewrite it really quick. We always multiply the numbers that are diagonal from each other, which is 80 and 10. So 80 times 10 is 800. And then we divide by the number that we have not used, which is always diagonal from the variable. And here it's 100. So 800 divided by 100 is 8. So I just showed you two different ways to prove that my answer is 8. Oh, and I just noticed, I don't know why I put a 10 here. My answer is 8. So I showed you two different ways to prove that 10% of 80 is 8. And here's another way. Right, we have 80 times 1/10. That gives you 80 over 100, and that reduces to 8. Okay, let's look here at letter D. We have determined 10% of 64. So I'm going to start with 64 times 1/10, right, for 10%. And again, you do what way works better for you. I just like to show you different ways. I know some of you prefer just multiplying. And if I multiply that, I get 64 over 10. And if I divide 64 over 10, that gives me 6.4, 6 4/10. I'm also going to show you that the answer is that 10% of 64 is 6.4 by using the box method. And if you notice, it is following the rule of moving the decimal one place to the left. So we fill out the percent out of 100. We know the whole is 64 and we want to figure out the part, which I labeled X. So we always multiply the numbers that are across from each other, which is 64 and 10, and that gives us 64 times 10 gives us 640. We divide by the number we haven't used, which is the one that's diagonal from the variable, and we have 100. So 64 divided by 100 gives you 6 4/10. Okay, so that's two different ways. Now on letter E, find 10% of 5. So one way to do it, again, the simple computation, 5 times 1/10, and that gives you 5 over 10 when you multiply. And if you reduce 5 over 10, you get 1/2. So 10% of 5 is 1/2. I'm also going to show you this using a double number line. Again, we start with 0. The percent is 10, so I'm going to go up by tens for my percents all the way to 100. I know that 100 equals 5, right, because 5 is the whole. And now I'm going to count the parts. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 equal parts. So 5 divided by 10 gives me 0.5, right? 0.5, which is the same as 1/2. So you can write it on your number line as a decimal or a fraction, right? Because 0.5 or 5/10 is the same as 1/2. I'm just going to go ahead and increase by decimals. And if you notice, it does go all the way to 5. And you can clearly see that 10% equals 1/2. Okay, so I showed you a few ways. I know I went fast because we have been doing percents for a few days now. This isn't a new lesson, this is review. Again, you can watch this as many times as you want and rewind. Do all the work, and I will see you in our video chat today.